So, welcome everybody to another episode of Startup Stories, where we're hearing from founders in their own voice, getting to peek a little bit behind the curtain. So, hear about the founding, the plans for the company in the future, and maybe a few things that you can't find on the internet today. So, I'd like to welcome Rens. He's the CEO of Kimo.ai. Super excited to have you here today, Rens.
Thanks, Emily. Happy to be here.
And excited to dig in a little bit into the history of your company and what got you started. So why don't we start off with the elevator pitch for Kimo? So what are you selling?
Okay. Thanks for this nice start. So Kimo is a personalized learning platform. That means as much as we have all the content on the web in any format, whether it's a video or a podcast or a book or a course. And we can personalize that to your individual needs, right? So whether you're studying for job A or job B in India or in the US, we can tailor that journey for you. That means technically that you could learn for any price point, and it would be way more specific than just sort of trying to find random stuff on the web. So it's personalized learning, ideally also with a hint towards emerging markets, because we think that is a place where this could be very impactful.
I love it. So trying to take the world's information and make it accessible, universally usable and accessible. Exactly. It sounds familiar.
Exactly, sounds familiar. And in a way, it is a little bit like Google, right? In the sense that we index information, we curate information. So there are similarities, but you could say it is a narrow version. It's purely focused on education in specific domains. So we don't crawl the entire library of URLs, right? For us, it's specifically focused on a narrow sort of education library. So it's much more narrow, but it has similarities.
Well, I also love the idea of getting education materials out to the far corners of the earth, but we can talk about that a little later. Let's start with you. So how did you get on this path to become a founder?
Well, so this is my third company. So actually, since I graduated as a psychologist in 2008, which is more or less the crisis period, right? In the financial crisis period, the first experience in the job market was that it was pretty difficult to get a job. A psychologist in Amsterdam, we have many of those, right? So half of the population here has a psychology degree. That was my experience at the time. So I found it pretty difficult to do something. And my first move at that time was to build my own little entity, which was focused on sports psychology. And therefore my first role was as a sports psychologist, literally working outside with athletes in professional soccer, in professional hockey, with free divers, with base jumpers. That was my first company. Very specific, very niche. Also super exciting. And from there I joined McKinsey as a consultant. So then, I had to buy a suit, dress up, visit clients, very different life. But the entrepreneurship, the vibe of that still sort of, it was still around, and I wanted to do that again. So I left McKinsey after a few years and built a second firm, which was pretty close to McKinsey. It was a strategy consulting firm. And then started Kimo. So technically, this is the third time I'm trying this. This is the most difficult one. This is this is AI. It's a very fast-moving environment, very different than a consultancy firm. But it's not the first time I'm trying this, and it's the third round. And Kimo specifically started when I met my co-founder during an executive MBA. So we were both studying. He's from India. He runs a very big education enterprise in India, which is brick and mortar, right? So physical buildings where every year 70,000 students go through. And over a whiskey, he asked me, hey, we have quite some problems with education in India. So yes, the people that we teach, they have relatively good chances, but those are the rich kids, right? So how about we brainstorm for a better solution, which is probably not brick and mortar, maybe more digital, that would really impact India. And we started brainstorming. In the end, we came up with this, and that's how we got going.
Okay. Well, he must appreciate the fact that you are well-versed in pressure and strategy and can handle the the founder's life?
I hope he does, but at the same time, I appreciate his skills when it comes to building software, right? Because obviously, if you're a consultant, I could make the PowerPoint slides look very pretty. I could technically make the strategy sound very good, but then really building the product is a different skill.
Yeah, well, your psychology, I think, helps also building a company, keeping a culture going. So interested to see how that impacts it as we go through the next questions.
Yeah.
So you're looking at building a new way to educate the masses, basically. What is your approach towards education in general? Because there's so much information out there. So how can we make the best of it?
Yeah, I think that is a very deep question, right? So education in general is a space where there's a lot of rules and regulations. It's different in every country. So India is really different than the Netherlands, really different than the US. And if you look at online education, obviously there's a lot of big players that already have a big name, the Coursera's, the Udemy's, Udacity's. So it's not an easy thing to really try to disrupt that. And one of the first things we did is what are the principles that we really believe in. So zooming out, meta level, what is the stuff that you think is necessary in the future and what do you need then to disrupt this market? And a couple of principles we had in the beginning is, and some of them I think are obvious and some are less obvious. The first one was learning is continuous, right? So learning is not a one-time thing where you do a master's or a bachelor's and then you stop and you hope to profit from that the rest of your life. This is something that in the future it will be very normal to keep doing that. Whether that's a daily thing or it's every 2 years you take a month for it, but that is not a one-off situation. It's a continuous situation. And with that, your competitive position in the market, both as a person or as a firm, is partly defined with how well you can learn, right? So actually learning as the competitive advantage as a person or as a company, that's how we see it. So it's necessary to do that continuously, and the better you are at this, the better your chances of sort of, sticking on to everything that's going on. In terms of another pillar we had was, you have this traditional thinking, Taylorism, which technically means as much as specialization, right? So everybody in the value chain is specialized in one specific thing. I don't really believe in that. Like personally, I feel that's a very risky bet, and maybe if you're a heart surgeon or you're a professional athlete and you're called Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi, maybe that's the right bet. But I think in many situations now over a career, that is a very risky bet, and it's also limiting you as a person in sort of flexibility of mental models, right? So if you're only this, the mental models and the cognitive fluency in different things, different ways of reasoning is quite limited. So I always feel that you need to be not a generalist, but you need to be multi-spiked. It's better to do a couple of things that you know well, instead of one. So that is another principle. Then
just to jump in on that, I'm a big fan of the book Range by David Epstein, and probably also because I am more of a generalist myself. So I love the idea of doing something in the arts, doing something in sports, doing something in tech, and then pulling all those pieces together.
Yeah, exactly. I love the book as well, and it's I think it has a lot of truisms that we also believe in. So you don't just specialize in finance or you don't just specialize in AI, but once you start combining, let's say, finance, psychology, and AI, suddenly you can actually build an enterprise, do the funding round. So actually the combination of those things is way more interesting. It does come with a downside, Emily. I think at some point my girlfriend will listen to this and she will tell you that the downside is that it takes a lot of time to study, right? So I study 2 hours a day, pretty rigid in that regard. She hates that, obviously. So there is a downside to this plan.
But that's probably what you need to do to keep pace in today's society. I think you get easily into the daily work, and then study is always last priority, whereas for you, first priority.
For me, it's first priority, and this kind of company you cannot build if you don't do that. It's simply impossible. Things move too fast. If I look to a different direction for a few months, then I'm out of sync with what's going on here. So it is, in my view, it's a necessity. And it's what sort of drives you to be competitive in this market.
So tell us, were you really prepared when you started? And did you handle the first hurdles that came your way, or did you need your own sports psychiatrist?
Yeah, okay, so a couple of questions there. Right? So was I prepared? Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that I felt very comfortable building a strategy. It was my third company, so I felt comfortable with doing all those, those hurdles that you need to do to build a company and setting it up. When it comes to AI specifically, and specifically we use a lot of AI models related to language, so NLP, and the cloud deployment of such models, understanding the benchmark of what is already there as a commodity API and what is needed to really become a valuable company. Were we prepared? Not really. I did 40 or 50 MOOCs online. That's why also, so I did a lot of those. So I understood most of the basics, but I'm definitely no expert. And to show how unprepared we were, I think, like the way we started is we both kept our current jobs. We were too scared to jump, technically. We kept our current jobs, and we hired one guy for 8 months to test everything. So I would say it's very, very cautious. It's not the Silicon Valley way where you have a deck, you raise funds. This we paid ourselves. We stayed employed, and this person had a couple of simple jobs, like find out what's available as commodity level AI. So a lot of Google APIs tested, and see if you can make a roadmap for when you think we will reach to the point where the AI models that we need will be at the level where we want them to be. For example, if you want to automate a tutor, you need to be able to ask questions, and the system needs to be able to give you high-quality answers back. It needs to be real-time, it needs to be high quality. But those Q&A models were really poor when we started. So the answers were very, very bad, but we needed to predict, so when is this going to be at the level that it's really going to be useful. And then in the end, of course, from that we derived a plan on how will this work out in terms of team, in terms of funding, in terms of roadmaps. And so I wouldn't say we were prepared, and we sort of mitigated that by starting very slowly and sort of easing our way into this. But also behind the curtains, right, like studying a lot for 2 years more or less to feel ready for the new role.
Yeah, I think that's also a key piece. So you're studying a lot, but then how do you apply that to real life and kind of digest it and see what it really means at the end?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you and your co-founder, you maybe talked over whiskey, and then that really helped the ideas to gel together. Sounds like a good recommendation for a new
Yeah,
founder.
it's the right place to start. At least on a personal level and with the mission. I think the mission was very, very clear from the beginning. That mission was also shared later with our first investors. So this is what we're building, and you can tap into that or not. But that's what we're trying to do here, and yeah, that really solidifies the connections in the beginning, and it's the driver, right, for the whole mission.
Mm. Yeah, and if your mission ties into something personal or that you feel like you're really improving the world around you, that also helps. So maybe tell us a little bit about how Kimo is helping then in these underprivileged areas.
Well, there's a current state and there's a desired state. Current state, I would say, product is, and let me be very Dutch here in the analysis, but the product is suboptimal. I think the recommendations are not good enough. The search is not good enough. So all of that stuff is not yet where it should be. At the same time, these models change so rapidly now that can happen relatively quickly. So if the search function is not where it needs to be 6 months later, you can look at a completely different product. But how it should work is the following, right? So first of all, Kimo has all the learning material on the web. So we index all of that in every format and more importantly at every price point. So that's the basic setup. So we don't need to sell book A or book B because we happen to be the owner of those books, or a course A or course B because we're Coursera and we have this agreement with the university. We can sell everything, whether paid or free. So the flexibility in the model is way larger than with these traditional players. The second layer of the system is technically filtering. So let's say you're starting a study and you say, hey, I'm interested in AI, and specifically I would like to be a machine learning engineer. A lot of it is filtering. So you can say, hey, I really like Harvard, I really like MIT, but mostly videos that are free, that are not longer than 10 minutes. And already that is a first bit of personalization. It's relatively simple. But that is already sort of one way that we're doing that. But the real version, the actual version that we're building is to really jump from job A to job B. And that means that you need to understand what job A is in underlying skills, in salaries, in other requirements. And you need to understand what job B is. And at the moment, there's no one on this planet that can actually tell you that. Right? There are some government databases, but they're very limited. So we build systems that predict the underlying skills based on job titles with a lot of depth, with a lot of granularity. And therefore, if you have job A and you have job B, there is a delta between those two, the skill gap. And those skills you can then learn through the platform. So that's the real thing we're building. So that is an additional personalization strategy, which is actually based on your personal skill gap.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, super important also in upskilling people to take advantage of new technologies. So are you having your own AI scientists follow these trainings, or how are you hiring the best, building the best team?
It's a major challenge. And I think in the US as well, but in the Netherlands it's probably even worse. So there's this crunch for talent in this space. Really difficult to hire people. We got lucky in the beginning, so I think that was pure luck. We hired one guy from an AI lab in Greece. Turned out he was really, really smart and a very nice guy to work with. And he brought in a lot of his friends, all from the same AI lab. So we just got very lucky with the first hire. But what we do, I think as criteria, and it relates to psychology, of course, is we need people to have a background where on a standalone basis, they have developed these kind of applications. So being in a big corporate and having contributed to it, for me, means nothing. I want someone, for example, the people building the app, have you actually built an app, launched it in the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, the Xiaomi Store, the Oppo Store, the Vivo Store? Have you actually done the whole thing, or did you contribute a piece to it? So I'm looking for people that have actually done the whole thing, which of course is hard, but it's the real experience. And the second thing I really look for is mental resilience. It's a startup, the days can be very long, we can pivot. So I also want people to be very resilient in terms of what they can handle as people. So those are the main two things that I look for.
How do you continue building on that resilience within the team once they're hired? What kind of leadership strategies do you use?
I think it's technically the philosophy is work hard, play hard, and I know that's the philosophy in a lot of companies, and it's never really executed. But here, like the office that we're in, so we have cooked lunch every day, so the lunch is very high quality and healthy. We have a gym and a sauna in the basement here, and we really promote people actually going there also during the day. So the real push is to keep that very healthy. Working from home, working in the office, I think people completely determine it by themselves. So there are no real rules there. Holiday, same thing. There are no rules. You can take your holiday as long as that is aligned with the team that you work for. So the team doesn't feel let down. So mostly by making sure everything is within reach. So it's very simple to exercise, very simple to have healthy food. And to be quite flexible with the time off. If people need the time off, you take it, as long as it's done correctly with the team.
Yeah, it sounds like that classic awesome place to work, startup mentality. Everybody is running full steam ahead.
Well, it's a theory, of course. It also is just a lot of hard work, right? So it's both.
Yeah. Do you ever hit a rough patch, or when do you feel like it's all going to come crashing down on your head?
To be honest, I think that rough patch was 2 weeks ago, more or less. So what happened here is that my co-founder and good friend Krishna, that I started the company with, he dropped out. He was in India during the COVID wave. And he got in trouble. He got hospitalized. Family business was also challenged. So technically, he called me 6 months ago saying, "Hey, I can't continue. I need to go back to the family and resolve things there," which meant that the CTO role sort of was thrown back to me, together with every other executive role. I was the only executive at that point, and that went well for like 6 months. And after 6 months, suddenly I started coughing. One ear was blocked. So my health was just really falling apart. And there were a lot of nudges from my mother, from my girlfriend, but even from my investors who say, "Hey, maybe you should take a holiday because it seems that the end is reached of this period." So that holiday was 10 days ago.
Okay. And now you feel energized, recharged.
I'm feeling quite a bit better, and also we got lucky because we hired a new CTO. I think who's brilliant. So the pressure's off a bit in that sense. Yeah.
Well, with that ebb and flow, I'm sure the pressure will come back again. But
100% sure that it will happen. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and from a leadership perspective, and leveraging AI and building this model that you're hoping will scale. How critical were the technology decisions that you made at the beginning, maybe also versus, how you've evolved over the last years?
In a way, very critical. And in a way, you have a lot of room to pivot, right? So this is a company where data rules and not politics. So meaning we have a very large dashboard in Grafana where everything flows into. So and everybody has access. Even our investors have access to that dashboard. So if you make a choice and it doesn't work, and the data shows it doesn't work, then almost by definition everybody will know. So even if as a leader I would say, "Hey, we do it anyway," then everybody else would say, "Hey, just look at the numbers and you can see that it's not going the right direction." So in that sense, if you capture a lot of information, the data sort of tell you where to go, and pivoting is relatively easy. That's one side of the story. On other dimensions, cloud deployment, elasticity of your company, scalability, obviously there you need to make the right choices, right? So you're not flexible everywhere. But I've been surprised with how easy we could still learn new things. And it comes with very simple things like onboarding. How do you get someone into your app? Simple logic. You probably need fewer screens, not more, right? So fewer screens, therefore you have more click-throughs. In our case, we had a flow with a couple of screens, worked perfectly. Then we changed it to a single screen flow, and then it was like 4 times worse. So it's counterintuitive, but of course you stick with the flow that works best.
Yeah, the data will tell you how the user experience is.
Yeah.
So, looking forward, what are the biggest milestones that you see coming up for you and the company?
Yeah, nice one. So this is in the future, right?
Yeah.
So far the biggest milestones have been the funding rounds, I would say. Statistically, in the Netherlands, as a company, you have like a 5% chance of doing the first funding round, and then from the first, let's say, angel-led round, you have a 3% chance of making it to the next round. If your investors are not so well known, so they're not Sequoia Capital or like very public names, and which is the case in our situation. So in both cases, we managed to make that leap. We closed both rounds, which I think is fantastic. And I guess the next big celebration will be if we close the next round, which is planned for. I can tell you when that is planned. Of course, we still need to do it. End of 2022.
Great. Well, that's a great moment. Good milestone to hit.
Yep.
And maybe for you personally in there, was there any point where you're like, wow, I'm so impressed with what we've done, your proudest moment?
Many actually. So the great thing is in a company like this, is you're sort of, the only thing you can make it work is if you hire people that are quite a bit smarter than you are in, at least in specific domains, but maybe in general. So I've been impressed many times with what people have done, both on the design side as well as on the backend side. I like, for example, Q&A. Can you build a system that can answer any question related to AI because it knows all the books on the web on AI, right? Which I felt was just really impressive if you get to that level and you can do it, and it's really fast and it's relatively good. Same as with all the indexation. Like if you index only articles, for example, or only videos, it's relatively straightforward. But if you index articles, videos, podcasts, books, and a lot of different content types, then technically these are different files, different metadata. You need to standardize that, normalize that to make it useful. All that stuff I've been really impressed with. To be honest, I would have no clue how to do it if these guys did not tell me how that could be done. So so I'm mostly impressed with the performance of the team there and how resilient they've been in problem solving when this was not clear. And there's no one around that can tell you how this should be done. So either you fix it, you solve it with long nights and lots of coffee, or it's over, right? So it's that kind of spirit which I really enjoy.
Cool. Well, it seems like maybe in a startup that's a little bit easier to come by because you're really tackling those like big, hairy, audacious problems. And I know in some classic organizations, it's hard to get people behind this idea of like hiring someone smarter than you and bringing them into the team.
Yeah, so here that is technically, as a startup, you don't have the funds to pay people the best salaries, right? So the actual attraction of this with these guys is that you can give them the very big problem to solve. And our biggest discussion when they joined, what I remember, it was not like, okay, what's the salary? But what is the hardware that we're getting to solve this problem, right? So how big is my laptop technically? If the laptop is too small, then it will take a long time for every calculation, and that is not ideal. But if you can give us these laptops, which were specific Lenovo laptops with GPUs inside, and so very expensive, probably the most expensive laptop you can buy at Lenovo. But if you can give them that kind of hardware, then we're in. So I like that spirit. It's really about the problem to solve. It's not about all the additional components like the salary and the car and etc.
Yeah, that's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Working actually with the tech and working on a good cloud platform.
Yeah.
So if we get into the juicy stuff, what are 3 things that you could share with us about Kimo or about yourself as a founder that we couldn't find on the internet?
I saw this question coming, and I'm not really one to keep secrets, but a couple things to share. Maybe to start with the obvious one, I have the most beautiful daughter on the planet called Julie, which is of course the love of my life, and also the I'm not sure if you can say person, but the little one that keeps me sane in difficult moments, right? So in Kimo we're building complex stuff, but with her I have like tomato days, where you spend the whole day focused on tomatoes, you eat 4 tomatoes together. Like this kind of stuff I think is the perfect alternative to having a tech job. That's one. The second thing that I think everybody that knows me personally would tell you is that I'm very much into extreme sports. So if I'm not working, I'm looking for stormy days out on the ocean with a kite, or I'm going mountaineering. So it's really work hard, play hard. And if it's play hard, then I want that to be extreme as well. And that's the real sort of, the flow moment where you can go out and really recover. And then the last thing, of course, but I already mentioned that I'm not the smartest guy in Kimo, right? So as a founder, as a CEO, you hire smarter guys than you. It's nice to take some of the credit if people think, hey, this is great. But the real story is that the guys in the team actually made this, and I'm orchestrating that situation. So maybe that's the secret. And maybe some people already know that, but that's the true situation.
So it's not imposter syndrome because you've actually just accepted that you are the imposter, but you're also a critical cog.
Yeah, well, I think you have to orchestrate the situation, make sure that it's there, and understand as much as you need to understand. But you need to be comfortable speaking to people that have PhDs in very specific graph neural net mathematics. That is just way over my head. I can read the papers, but I don't understand anything beyond line number 3. But if you're comfortable there and you can orchestrate the right setting, then I think you can still succeed.
Cool. Well, we talked about a lot of stuff. Is there anything that you want to give back to the listeners, or some piece of wisdom that you wish you knew at the beginning? The classic ask.
No, I would say try the app. So try Kimo, download it, and mostly like we're a Dutch company, we like Dutch feedback. So we are not there yet. The product still needs to be improved. So maybe if you can, and if you like what we're doing, send us the most blunt Dutch feedback that you can imagine, and we will work with that.
Cool. Well, maybe you'll get it. That's the danger of asking for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it sounds like you're also very hard on yourself and hard on the company, but you have big goals. So, you need to keep challenging to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks.
And excited to see where Kimo goes in the next years, and maybe we can connect again, actually in person, not in our home studios here.
Yeah, that would be great, Emily. You're always welcome here in the office, or I can fly over there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and looking forward to the next time we talk. Wishing you all the best, and thanks to everyone out there. Download the app and check out online what Google for Startups can offer your company to help you get to an amazing building like where Rens is sitting today. And this could be you.